In this video, we'll discuss common methods of voting. Now, there are four major methods we'll talk about: plurality, majority, border count, and pairwise comparison. In the majority, we'll also discuss the concept of the Hare method. Now, the plurality is one of the most common methods used in the United States. In this one, every voter votes for one candidate, and whoever gets the most votes wins. Doesn't matter what percent of the vote, as long as they have the most votes. So let's say we have Eric, Constance, and Beth running for mayor. And if Eric gets 8,024 votes, Constance gets 9,426 votes, how many would Beth need to win by plurality? Again, plurality just means she needs one more than any other candidate. So since Constance had 9,426 votes, Beth would just need 9,427 to win by plurality. Now, some people don't like that method because you could win with a less than 50% of the vote. Like there, Beth would have won with only about 35-40% of the vote. Is that really how we want to govern? So some people would prefer the majority rule, which says that you have to win over 50% of the votes to be the candidate. So say we go back to the same idea of the three candidates running for mayor, and there were 20,000 total votes cast. What would it take to win by majority rule? So majority rule, again, is more than 50%. So we need to figure out what's 50%, and then exactly one more vote will win that. Well, 50% of 20,000 is 10,000, plus one more means that Beth would need to win 10,001 votes to win by majority rule if 20,000 votes were cast. Now let's go back to the initial situation though, which was where Eric got 8,024 and Constance already has the 9,426 votes. Say instead of by plurality, Beth needs to win by majority. So she needs that 50% plus 1. So if we think about 50% being Constance's votes and Eric's votes combined, and then we add one more, that will get Beth over the 50%. So we take the 8,024, the 9,426, add one more to that, and that would tell us that Beth would have needed to win at least 17,451 votes to win by majority rule. Think about the difference there. Plurality, she only needed 9,427, but by majority, she would need 17,451. It's a huge difference in what's necessary to win. So the problem there, you see, is in plurality, you don't always get a true majority. So then the question is, well, if we rule by majority rule, what do we do? And that's where the Hare method comes into play. The Hare method says that we hold runoff elections, most commonly with the two candidates that get the most votes. Sometimes they'll do elections where one's taken off at a time of the lowest vote getter, but the easiest thing often is to just take the two highest vote earners and do a runoff election for them. So say that we had these three candidates again, but Beth actually got 7,986 votes. So what would happen if the town uses the majority vote with the Hare method? So in this method, we'd say remove the candidate with the fewest votes. So Beth would be removed, and we'd have a runoff between Eric and Constance for the election for mayor. Now, another method that's used to avoid some of these issues is called the border count. And this we use is a ranking method because having to do runoff elections can be expensive and time consuming, and not having what feels like a significant number of people voting for a candidate doesn't always make people sit well with who wins. So with the border count, voters rank all the candidates. So they're not just voting for their favorite, they're going to rank them in how they feel they would do for that position. In the ranking, the lowest rank gets 1 point, and then the points go up 1 point at a time. So if there's 5 candidates, first place would get 5 points. And last place would get 1 point. So you take that for each voter, and you sum up all those ranking points. And then whoever got the most points wins the competition or the election. So let's say that we have Eric, Constance, and Beth this time running for a club president. But it only has 5 members to keep this fairly easy to understand what's going on. And we know using the border count method, who wins. So when we look at this, let's start with Eric. In the first person, he finished third, so he gets 1 point. Again, third, so he gets 1 point. He gets 3 points for the third person, 2 points for the second person, and 3 points for the fifth person because of how he placed. That gave him a total of 10 points. Constance would get 3 points for the first person, 2 points for the second person, only 1 point for the third, 3 points for the fourth, and 2 points for the fifth, for a total of 11 points. And then Beth got 2 points for the first, 3 points for the second voter, 2 points for the third voter, but only 1 point for each of the final voters, for a total of 9. So using a board account method, Constance would win this election for club president. Now we sometimes will also use frequency tables to build this same type of method, especially when there's more than 5 or 6 people voting. And often there's only so many different ranking combinations possible depending on how many people there are. Like with 3 people, there's really up to 6 options. But in this case, we're saying only 4 different rankings occurred. So what we would do is we take their ranking value and multiply it by the frequency for each of those rows. So let's start with Eric. He finished third, so he gets 1 point for these 20 voters. That's 1 for each of the 20, so that's 1 times 20. That's 1 point for each of these 5, 1 times 5. 2 points for each of these 10, so that's 2 times 10. And then 3 points for each of these 15, so that's 3 times 15. Same thing with Constance. She gets 2 points for these 20. 3 points for these 5, 3 points for the 10, and then 1 point for the 15. And then Beth gets 3 points for the 20, 2 points for the 5, 1 point for the 10, and then 2 points for the 15. And when summed up, hers is 110. So using this frequency table, if this was the case, and Beth had the most points, so Beth would win the competition. Now the last type we'll talk about is the pairwise comparison. In this one, voters rank each candidate head to head. So when there's multiple candidates, they're going to look and say, I think this person is better than that person, or they're equal to me. When this happens, if one is preferred to the other in a head to head, the person preferred gets 1 point, the person that's not gets 0 points. And you'll see it written often as an inequality. So whoever it's like A is greater than B, A would get 1 point. If it was A less than B, A would get 0 points, B would get 1 point. If they're equally preferred, so no preference, they get the equal sign, each person gets half of that point. So every head-to-head is worth a total of 1 point, and so then you will, again, add up all the points, and whoever has the most points will win. So let's say that we're looking at that club presidency of those 5 members again, but they use a pairwise comparison method instead. So here we have each of the people saying how do they vote head to head. What I do to help me is I make my own table for each of the candidates. So we got Eric, Constance, and Beth. So Eric gets 1 point for beating Constance, 1 point for beating Beth. And then Beth and Constance get a half a point each for being tied. So in this first person, Eric's got 2, Constance gets half a point, Beth gets half a point. In the second person, Eric gets 0 points against Constance, 1 point against Beth, so he gets his 1 point. Constance gets the 1 point for beating out Eric and 1 point for beating out Beth, so she gets 2 total points. And Beth was lost to both of them in head-to-head, so she gets 0 points for member 2. For member 3, Eric gets half a point for being equal to Constance and half a point for being equal to Beth, so he gets 1 total point. Constance gets half a point here and 1 whole point for being preferred over Beth, so she gets 1.5 points. And Beth gets only that half point for being equal to Eric. For the fourth person, Eric gets 0 points against Constance and 0 points against Beth, so he gets 0 points from member 4. Constance gets 1 point for beating out Eric, but 0 points for beating out Beth, and then Beth gets 2 points for beating them both. And lastly, Eric gets half a point for beating out Constance, but 0 for Beth, so he gets a total of half a point from member 5. Constance gets half a point for beating equal to Eric, but nothing for Beth, so she gets half a point. and then Beth beat both of them, so she gets a point for each, and that's 2 total points. So every row, you can see, adds up to 3 total points. So there should be 15 total points in this competition. So if I add up each column for the person, Eric would have 4.5 points, Constance has 5.5 points, and Beth has 5 points. In total, that's 15 points. In this case, Constance had the most points, so Constance would win.